Hello, good morning. Welcome to the Trails Radio Show. Thank you for joining us this morning. I hope you all are doing well. Today, my special guest is Mr. J.V. Torres. Thank you, and join us in a minute. Okay, my first question to you is, how did you get started? How did your career begin? How did you get started in the industry?
Are you referring to the podcast industry? I'm involved in a lot of industries.
Yeah.
Which industry are you referring to?
The podcast. Mm-hmm.
I actually got into it as veering off from a research project that I was working on initially in the field of linguistics. Mm-hmm. I was studying the speech patterns, if you will, of American dialect from the 30s, 20s, 30s, and 40s to now. I was trying to find where those linguistic differences were, intonation and pronunciation and that sort of thing. So in doing so, I was listening to old classic CBS radio detective stories and things of that nature, old dramas, if you will. And then I would try to compare them with current, more modern audio dramas on different podcasts. And rather than continue in this project of mine to try to kind of pinpoint what those variations were, and linguistically speaking, I completely went off course and just became immersed in podcasting in that way that I became enthralled with the whole idea of creating a world in a fiction podcast. Mm-hmm. And that's how I ended up doing The Rise of King Osiris, because I'm a writer too, and I just said, you know what, I could do this. I could just piece this story together, and instead of thinking, daydreaming that someday I'll make a film out of it, why don't I just do a series podcast show about it, and that's how I got started in it.
Wow, that's amazing. And can you explain your podcast because some people may not be aware, what it is?
Sure, no, of course. Well, the story is America. I wrote this story back in 2016 when this is even before the President Trump got elected. Mm-hmm. I was envisioning a futuristic America under a dictatorship. But in order for there to be a true dictatorship, there would have to be all these variables that would happen. So I figured that it would be more dramatic if we had an absolute king to rule over America versus some kind of political dictator, which is what the story is about. It's about America under a king instead of a president, if you will, or under a dictator. This king is a member of the secret society's elite, if you will. He's a member of the military branch. He's a general in the army. He's the kind of person that you would envision if someone were to be a king in this country. This would be the kind of person you would want, someone who's well connected in the establishment, someone who's takes orders very well, someone who's in the military who will follow orders, because that's what the kingmakers, if you will, wanted for America. And so they said, we're not going to deal with politics anymore. We're not going to deal with right or left, Republican, Democrat. We're not going to deal with it by a two-party system. We're just going to have one king, one ruler. He's our guy. Whatever we want done in this country, we'll just have him make the laws, and then that's the end of it. Kind of like taking us back to the days of old. Mm-hmm. But what they don't realize is that he's actually, we don't find this out until later, that he's actually has an agenda of his own. He uses his power to go after the very people who put him in power, and that's what sets this whole drama in motion, is that he's actually on a quest to destroy the very people who put him in that position. He becomes essentially an antichrist figure on the world stage. This is what the story is about. It's really a culmination of current politics, gloom and doom, catastrophe kind of future that we might think. There's an infusion of sci-fi in there, and ultimately there's a lot of biblical references to the tribulations and the end of the world. That's what this story is about. The story is about America leading the way to the end of the world.
That sounds very interesting. Yeah.
It's a lot, right? It's quite epic.
Well, it's very interesting. At least I find it is. It. Yeah, I'll have to check it out. It sounds very interesting.
It's a very big story. It's a very epic story, which is why I'm going into my 4th season now. We're slated to do 6 seasons. It's that big.
Oh, wow.
So I figured, we could probably squeeze 2 more seasons out of this and see where it goes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Besides this, do you have any other projects you're working on or anything upcoming?
Yeah, I'm working with a number of other people. I'm trying to put together a network now of other podcasters to do streaming on YouTube. I have a YouTube channel that we've been doing spoof videos and things of that nature. So I'm trying to set up my video studio, if you will. I have 2 different locations right now, but we're going to be moving towards video production here in the next year or so. So, we're obviously still very involved in the audio drama. That's going to be, there's a couple of movies that were actually in the works when the coronavirus pandemic hit and kind of just put the brakes on those 2. So we actually had 2 films in the works that were related to the drama, to the podcast. So we're going to continue doing that, maybe find other ways to produce videos. I'm also publishing the first novel related to the podcast as well. That should be coming out this year. So be looking for that novel. It's going to be very intense.
Okay.
And there's a number of other projects I'm involved in. Children's books and doing narrations for other people as well. And I'm involved in a lot of different projects.
Well, that's great. Yeah, it's great to stay busy, especially that you love doing the work you do.
Oh yeah, sure. Absolutely. I wouldn't be doing it if I didn't. That's the thing. Is I love the creative aspect of what I do. Whenever I get a chance to collaborate with other audio dramatists or podcasters, it's always an adventure and it's always fun because you get to hear other people's ideas. You get to work with other people's way of thinking, and that's always that can always lead to some really surprising places.
Absolutely. Yeah, I do theater. I'm a stage actor, and I do the radio show and do some voiceover work, and it's always fun to have new opportunities come your way. I enjoy working.
Of course, yes.
My next question to you is, what do you find is the most challenging aspects in your career, or the most difficult?
I've always fancied myself a decent marketer. I've always been well in sales. Prior in a previous life, I've done international sales of different products, and I've done marketing for magazines over the years. Mm-hmm. So for me, marketing is kind of a second nature. I've always been good at that. It's kind of a nice feature to have when you're a creative person. What I find most challenging in the podcast world is finding ways to monetize your work. It's not impossible. It is definitely something that's trending in the right direction. But there just seems to be so many free things out there that nobody really wants to pay for anything. And so that's what I find to be the most challenging, is to try to monetize this enough to where it could sustain itself. Right now, we have one major sponsor, which is the publishing company that actually produces it. So, if it weren't for that, there would be no King of Silence, because that's the production company, that's the publishing company that funds the entire project. But, that if it weren't, like I said, if it weren't for that, but, I know I get it, people out there that produce all kinds of content trying to get sponsors, and a lot of them can get them when they meet a certain threshold. So I think we're fortunate in that we've met a lot of those thresholds that we can monetize our show. But it's really like drip, drip, drip. That's the most challenging thing, I think, for me in this.
Yeah, the internet, it can be a big help, but it can also, be a negative. You
can get lost in it.
Yeah.
And, it doesn't help when I guess when you have fans. Yeah, we have a lot of fans, but that few of them will actually go and become a patron or buy the T-shirts. They'll buy T-shirts, they'll buy things, but it's never in such a large quantity that we would be like, oh, we did really well this month. This month, let's push this. It's not. We're not there yet. We don't have the millions and millions of subscribers that it would take, because you have to play the numbers game. If you have 100,000 people listen to your show, what percent? Like a small percentage of them will actually go and purchase some of the products, your merchandise. Mm-hmm. So you have to multiply that exponentially to make a decent enough money. Generated revenue to sustain itself. And that's the biggest challenge, because there's so many podcasts, there's so many of them out there that people just kind of get overwhelmed. And you really just got to find your niche and appeal to a certain group of people. I think the show, we're fortunate that we appeal to a certain group of people. We appeal to people who like big stories, epic stories, action. They like conspiracy theories, they like aliens or ghosts or things of that nature. They're into the occult. All of these themes you find in our show. You find, the whole reptilian conspiracy. There's always this UFO conspiracy. There's the devil is in the story. So there's like a lot of things that appeal to a certain kind of audience, and we just need to get out to a much larger portion, if you will, Absolutely. Of people that pull them in. Because the people listen to the show all over the world. I mean, we have listeners all over the world in countries I didn't even know how to pronounce their names. So, I mean, we're growing. It's a very popular show amongst certain kinds of people. But like I said, we need to hit that 1 million or 2 million or 3 million mark is where we need to get. And we're far from that.
Yeah. Well, it grows every day, slowly but surely,
It does.
Yeah, I'm amazed, my show is listened all around the world. When I first started, someone reached out to me, was in you could hear it in England, and I'm like, wait, wow, I didn't even know it would reach, and it's amazing, you hear from fans and all around the world,
Yeah, we get messages sometimes from people. I think most of them are pretty benign. They're not really all that, break shakes. So they're just, hey, thanks, you get really good show. I really like this. Well, you're making a connection here. But then once in a while, we get those really weird ones, like the ones that the people just take a little too seriously what's going on in the show. And they, write these really long-winded emails, or they go on Reddit and they write these really long-winded threads, which I'm flattered that they would take the time really to analyze it that deeply. But sometimes it's creepy.
Yeah, they get way into it.
Which is great, because I guess, they're like, well, you must be referring to this, and, when this character said that in this episode, and blah, 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 blah. I'm like, whoa, man, you really did do your homework. Yeah, that part of it is fun. Some of it is just like, okay, it's just a show, dude. It's just fiction. It's not real, okay? I don't have any more insight than you think I do. It's just my imagination.
Absolutely, and you have to have a great, broad imagination to create something like that, and it's great to do fiction more than nonfiction, because you can just go out there, and, I'm a writer too. I write some short stories, and all of mine is mostly fiction, and it's fun, you just go deep in your mind and just let the inspiration flow. You can just create all kind of things, and believe it or not, some people will like some of the crazy ideas you bring forth.
Yeah, yeah, no doubt. That's one of the rewards. It's just, I don't know. I think it's a compounding kind of reward for me, because on the one hand, it's like, yeah, I get to let my creative juices flow, and I create these worlds and all these people.